Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Even If Project podcast. I'm Christina, and I'm so excited you guys are here with me today. With Christmas coming up, I feel like I have been moving 1,000 miles a minute lately between shopping and wrapping gifts, and hunting season is here. Starting CrossFit again, things at home, and my next semester of school is starting up. It's just been a lot. Good stuff. For the most part, good stuff. There are a few things that are not so good mixed in there too, unfortunately, but still a lot. And speaking of Christmas, we are almost there, right? We are what? Today is the 16th. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 days away from Christmas. That feels wild. That came up so fast, but we're here, we're grateful, and we're blessed for all the things. And honestly, it's why I just always look forward to recording these episodes, because it just forces me to just slow down for a second, to just actually sit still, to open up my Bible, to grab a cup of coffee, to catch my breath, and just have some good old Jesus time. So, if you're listening right now while you're driving or folding laundry or wrapping gifts late at night, I am really glad that you chose to spend it with me. And like I already said, as always, I've got my coffee and my Bible open. And today we are in a Between the Verses episode. And for this BTV episode, we are talking about something that I honestly think affects almost all of us, even if we don't say it out loud. And it's caring way too much what people think of us. And I know that sounds basic, like, okay, Christina, groundbreaking, just don't care. But if it were that easy, we wouldn't be having this conversation, right? Because for most of us, it's not just about wanting people to like us. It's deeper than that. It's wanting to feel safe around people, to not wanting to be misunderstood, not wanting to be judged or labeled or talked about, not wanting to feel awkward or out of place, or not wanting to feel like you're too much or somehow still not enough. And if you're someone who's trying to follow Jesus, especially if you're newer in your faith, this can feel even heavier, because now it's not just, what do people think of me? It's, what do people think about my faith? What do people think about the way I live now? What do people think about the things I don't do anymore? And let's be honest, people notice that stuff. Old friends notice, family notice, coworkers notice. And sometimes they judge. Sometimes they don't get it. Sometimes they say things that stick with you longer than you want them to. And the pressure usually doesn't show up in some big dramatic moment. It usually sneaks in quietly. It looks like replaying conversations in your head way after you left, explaining yourself when nobody asked you to, holding back parts of yourself so things just won't feel uncomfortable, second guessing decisions that you felt so great about 5 seconds ago. And I noticed this recently in myself as well. There's been seasons where I genuinely just do not care what people think of me. And then there are seasons like right now where suddenly I do again. And that doesn't mean I failed. It doesn't mean I've gone backwards. It doesn't mean my faith is weak. It just means I'm human. Sometimes we don't overcome something once and then never deal with it again. Sometimes it comes back in a much different way. Different people, different situations, different pressures. And what I've realized with this is I hadn't stopped loving God. I hadn't stopped believing. I hadn't stopped wanting to walk with Him. I had just slowly started listening to other voices louder than His. And that shift is so subtle that we don't always notice it happening, because caring what people think usually doesn't feel sinful. It feels normal, understandable, like self-protection. But over time, it starts running things: your mood, your peace, your confidence, your decisions. And suddenly you're not asking, is this right? You're asking, will this keep things smooth? You're not asking what's true. You're asking, what will keep people more comfortable? And that's exhausting. So that's what we're unpacking today. Not in a heavy way, not in a shame way, just honestly. Because I think a lot of us are tired, not physically, but mentally, tired of carrying opinions that were never meant to be ours to hold in the first place. When I finally slowed down enough to just sit with that feeling, I asked, why does this still get to me like this? because it's not new. I've dealt with this before. And instead of beating myself up over it, I asked, what's actually underneath this? And that's where God gently pointed something out to me. Part of why this was bothering me so much was because I didn't expect it to feel uncomfortable anymore. I thought I was past it now. I assumed that once I walked with Jesus, things like this just wouldn't get to me anymore or get to me as much, that I'd be more confident, I'd be more steady, less bothered. But that's not really how it works. Following Jesus doesn't mean people suddenly understand you more. Sometimes it actually does the complete opposite. Jesus lived a perfect life. He never sinned. He never messed up. He never hurt anyone. And he still wasn't approved by everyone. People misunderstood him all the time. They judged him. They talked about him. They hated him. Some people loved him. Some people didn't. And that stopped me in my tracks, because if the most perfect person to ever walk the earth wasn't liked by everyone, why do I expect to be? The next thing God showed me was the contrast between who Jesus is and who people are. People are flawed, emotional, inconsistent, limited in what they can see. Jesus is steady, faithful, unchanging, and most importantly, he's the one who died for us. Scripture says very rarely would someone die even for a good person. But Jesus died for us while we were still a mess. And that changes the weight of whose opinion actually matters. Because the people whose approval I'm worried about didn't bleed for me. Jesus did. That doesn't make people bad. It just means they are not God. And once I started seeing it that way, I realized this wasn't just some abstract idea. It was showing up in real, normal, everyday moments. Fear of man shows up in real choices: who we hang out with, what we say yes to, what we stay silent about, what we compromise on. And sometimes it shows up in ways that we just don't even realize it at first. This actually came up for my husband and I recently in just such a normal, everyday way. We were talking about how we notice ourselves worrying about what other people think when we're with our son, like when we're at the park or at a play place or anywhere in public, really. If he's playing with something and another kid walks up, we are immediately like, oh, I'm so sorry. Or, oh, bud, let's move so they can have their turn. Or, oh, it's okay. Go ahead. We'll just go right over here. And on the surface, that sounds polite. It sounds considerate. It sounds like sharing. It sounds like the right thing, right? But we started realizing something. Most of the time, our son isn't being rude at all. He's not doing anything wrong. He's not refusing to share or being mean. We are stepping in because we are uncomfortable. We are worried someone will think they're not teaching him manners or how to share, or they're not good parents, or they are those parents. And without even meaning to, we're constantly pulling him out of moments he's genuinely enjoying. Not because he needs correction, not because there's an issue, but because we are trying to manage other people's opinions in real time. And at one point, we both kind of looked at each other and said, I think this is actually taken away from his fun. And that hit me. It was a gut check because it showed me how subtle this stuff really is. And I feel like a lot of us do this without realizing it. Fear of what people think doesn't always look dramatic. Sometimes it looks like over apologizing or over correcting or stepping in when no one asked you to. And that's when it clicked for me. This isn't just something we struggle with internally. It affects how we parent, how we respond, how much space we give ourselves and our kids just to exist. And if I'm being honest, I don't want my son growing up learning that his joy should shrink back just to keep everyone else and these strangers comfortable. That doesn't mean that we don't teach him kindness or sharing. It just means we're learning the difference between guiding him and managing other people's opinions, of being considerate and just living our lives. Because once we noticed it with him, we started seeing it everywhere. We would apologize when he would cry in public, even though he's just a kid. We feel tense on airplanes, already bracing ourselves, already thinking, please don't bother anyone. Please don't be loud. Please don't make this uncomfortable. And the thing is, He's not doing anything wrong. He's not being disrespectful. He's not being out of line. He's just being a kid. And yet somehow and somewhere, we've learned to feel responsible for everyone else's comfort the moment we exist in a shared space. And I realized we do this in our own lives too. We pull ourselves back, we tone ourselves down, we apologize for things that don't actually need an apology. Not because we're wrong, but because we're trying to keep everyone else comfortable. And over time, that starts to shape how we move through this world. More cautious, more guarded, more aware of how we're being perceived than just enjoying our own lives. And that's exhausting. It's in those smaller moments too, like being at a store, pushing a cart, walking the right direction, doing literally nothing wrong, and someone comes up next to you or behind you and you immediately go, "Oh, I'm so sorry." Even though we didn't bump into them, we didn't cut them off, we didn't do anything. We just apologize out of instinct. And then the opposite happens. Someone walks right in front of us, doesn't say excuse me, cuts us off, and we get irritated like, wow, that was rude. But then you think about it for a second, and that person didn't even notice. They weren't thinking about us at all. They were just living their life. And that's when it really hits you. How much energy we spend worrying about how we're coming across while other people aren't thinking about us nearly as much as we think they are. And this is where that distinction matters, though. There's a difference between being rude and just not carrying unnecessary awareness of everyone around you. Most of us aren't struggling with being inconsiderate, though. We're struggling with overcorrecting, over apologizing, over explaining, over managing situations that don't actually need managing. Not because we're doing something wrong, but because we don't want to be perceived as doing something wrong. And that adds up because when you live life like that long enough, you start shrinking yourself in really small ways all day long. You stop making memories while everyone else gets to keep theirs. So, what do you actually do with this? Not in theory, not in a perfect spiritual way, just in real life. For me, it started with noticing it instead of fighting it, catching myself in the moment and thinking, okay, I'm replaying this again. Why am I letting this take up so much space? Or he's just a kid, he's just playing. Because pretending you don't care doesn't work. It just pushes it down until it shows up later as stress, as overthinking, as anxiety, or just second guessing everything. So instead of shutting the feeling off, I've been trying to just slow it down. Asking simple questions like, why did that hit a nerve? Or what am I afraid of? Or what am I actually trying to protect? And sometimes I'll bring God into it quietly, not in a fancy way, just, okay, God, help me see this clearly. Nothing dramatic, just awareness. Then I decide what actually matters in that moment. Not what keeps things smooth, not what makes everyone else happy, but what I can live with afterwards. Because that's a difference. There's a difference between temporary comfort and long-term peace. Fear of what people think usually chases comfort, but it almost never brings us peace. And that's where faith comes in. When we remember who we're actually answering to, it loosens our grip on everyone else's opinions. Not perfectly, not instantly by any means, but just enough to pause. Sometimes doing the right thing feels uncomfortable at first, but you feel lighter later. And sometimes doing the easy thing feels fine at first, but it sticks with you afterwards. That's been a really helpful filter for me. And no, this doesn't mean you suddenly stop caring what anyone thinks. That's not realistic. It just means their opinions don't get the final say anymore. You still notice them. You just don't let them drive. And over time, that changes how you show up. You hesitate less, you explain less, you breathe easier. Not because people changed, but because you remember what actually matters. If you're listening to this and thinking, okay, but I still mess this up all the time, same. This isn't something you master once and move on from. It's something you notice quicker every time you look at it. You catch it sooner, you spiral less, you recover faster. And honestly, I think that's growth. Not never caring what people think, but just not letting it run your life anymore. And for me, God has been really gentle in this season, not calling me out, not shaming me, just reminding me quietly, you don't have to carry that. You don't have to carry every opinion. You don't have to manage everyone's comfort. You don't have to explain yourself to everyone, because I do that a lot. And that reminder alone has brought me a lot of peace. So if this is something you're wrestling with too, I just want you to know you're not behind. You're not weak. You're not failing at faith. You're learning. You're becoming more aware. And that is what matters. Maybe today the takeaway is really simple. When you catch yourself carrying more than you want to, pause, just breathe, and ask yourself what actually matters here. That question alone can change a lot. All right, guys, thank you so much for joining me today. It really means so much. If this episode spoke to you, if it encouraged you, or if it reminded you that God can still use you in the simplest steps of faith, would you just share it with someone who might need that too? You never know what kind of seed that small moment might plant. And if you're new here, welcome. You are already part of this little community now. You can find all the details for our weekly virtual study, our reflection questions, and encouragement throughout the week over on our Instagram at the Even If Project. And if you're joining for our next Bible study, we'll be in John 8:12 through 30, where Jesus calls himself the light of the world, and then things get tense fast. People question him, people push back, people argue, and Jesus keeps speaking truth anyways. So just like this episode, if you've ever felt caught between what you believe and what people think, that one's going to hit close to home. Bring your coffee, your Bible, and an open heart, and I'll meet you guys right back here. I love you all. I'll talk to you soon.